All right. Well, I would now like to call the June 18th, 2025 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting to order. Could we please start with a roll call?
Absolutely. Michelle Roth,
Present.
Mary Lynn,
Present.
Corkett Honoran,
Here.
Robert Davidson,
Here.
Ralph Grosswald,
Here.
Daniel Leonard,
Here.
Ethan Augreen,
Here.
Lisa Knobloch,
Here.
Becky Doyle is here, Susan Bartlett,
Here.
Hannah Mulroy,
Here.
and we have Jonah Kreitzberg from staff as well.
Here.
Councilmember Popkin.
Here.
And then from Platte River Power Authority, we have Paul Davis, Javier Camacho, and Tim Blodgett. So Chair, you have a quorum.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll start off by reading our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the First Peoples have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure these injustices do not happen again. In our inclusion statement, the Sustainability Advisory Board embraces diverse perspectives from its members and the public. To create an inclusive space where everyone feels welcome to share their opinion, the board asks that all attendees listen and speak with respect and avoid attacks on individuals or specific group identities, including those like me who can't read. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Does anyone have any changes or corrections that need to be made? Go ahead, Ethan.
I didn't see the minutes for the special meeting that preceded the regular meeting. I was wondering if we have those minutes or if they could be included.
It's my understanding that there won't be minutes for the special meeting because it comprised interviews and deliberation. But we may have to double check with Heather on that.
That was my understanding as well.
Same. There are no council minutes to my knowledge from like the board interviews that we did across all of the boards as well, just from a consistency standpoint.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Ethan, did you have any other comments on
No.
the minutes? Okay. Anyone else? Well, do we have a motion to approve them?
Move to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Can second that.
All right. All those in support? All those opposed?
I abstain because I wasn't there.
Okay. Well, looks like that passes. Thanks. Okay. Are there any agenda revisions we need to account for?
Not urgent, but if there's time, I just wanted to add an item at the end, talking to you all about the potential to order you all some volunteer shirts.
Okay. So then moves us on to, Ralph, sorry.
And I will just briefly give an update on the Front Range Sustainability Council. We did have a steering committee meeting, but it'll take only a minute or two. As I'm dropping off the board, one of the things I'll want to approach is if there's somebody else on the board that would like to be a liaison from our community board to that group.
Thanks, Ralph. Let's pull that up in the items from the board section on the agenda. Okay. Well, up next is our general business section, and we've got one item, and it's around distributed energy resources and virtual power plants. Dates from our team at the City of Longmont and the Platte River Power Authority. So I'm not sure who is leading that, but I will turn it over to the powers that be.
I'll get it started. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Susan Bartlett. I'm the Director of Energy Strategies and Solutions for Longmont Power and Communications. And a year ago, April, Hannah Mulroy, who's with us this evening, came to the board to talk about new solar net metering rates and our revised interconnection standards. And during that conversation that we had with you all, there were additional questions around distributed energy resources and, what are they and how are they being implemented or integrated into our grid? And we also talked a little bit about their role in a virtual power plant. And it made sense for us to find a time to come back and talk with you a little bit more in detail about what they are and, kind of how we're implementing programs and whatnot related to distributed energy resources and virtual power plants. So I have Hannah with me this evening, as well as Paul Davis from Platte River Power Authority, and they're going to kind of run you through some grounding information, if you will. And then also Javier Camacho is here from Platte River, and he's just going to use the opportunity to provide news and updates from Platte River. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen and pass it on to Hannah. Let's see.
Thanks, Susan, and thank you for sharing your screen. Of course, the sun is going to set and I'm going to have like a big strip of light across my face, but I'll try and stay out of it for you all. I'm Hannah Mulroy. I don't think I've had a chance to meet all of you, but I am the Energy Portfolio Development Manager here for the City of Longmont, Longmont Power and Communications. I work on Susan's team under Energy Strategies and Solutions, and I work very closely with Platte River on kind of all things DERS, DERMS, virtual power plant, all of those fun acronyms. So I'm excited to work with Paul to present to you today because we've been working together for a while now on this. So I think Susan's going to share her screen perhaps. So
Are you not seeing my screen?
No. I can share if you can't, which is... There we go.
How about now?
Perfect. Yep.
Okay.
All right. As I mentioned, I'm Hannah. Slide, please. So as Susan mentioned, I'm going to start things off and then I'm going to hand it over to Paul Davis with Platte River Power Authority. And then Javier is going to come on as well with some more general updates. I'm going to talk to you today about distributed energy resources, DERs or DERs, tend to just say DER myself, and virtual power plants or VPPs, which is something that's really new and exciting and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about today. Paul's going to talk about local and regional implementation, including our work together as the 4 owner communities of Loveland, Estes Park, Fort Collins, ourselves work with Platte River on making our kind of dreams come true. And then, like I said, Javier is going to come in at the end to talk about Platte River updates. Slide. Oh. Okay. What are distributed energy resources? It's a broad term for devices and technologies that interface with the electrical system to provide both grid and customer benefits. Usually that interface should ideally include some sort of back and forth communication with them. So interfacing isn't a one-directional thing. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later. While solar is certainly considered a distributed energy resource because of the lack of controllability or dispatchability of solar, it's included. It's certainly something to be considered, but isn't necessarily a part of the VPP because it can't talk to us in the same way as some of the other smart devices. So we're going to go into that a little bit more, but EVs is certainly an example, demand charge management, battery storage technology, certainly very important. Smart thermostats is a big part of VPP, or for a big part of VPPs. There's some more edge things such as smart water heaters and even smart heat pumps that have smart inverters in them. But that is a little more on the fringe. So generally we're talking about EVs, batteries, thermostats, and then sometimes we're talking about solar or commercial industrial, but we won't get into that too much. Slide, I think. Virtual power plants, that's the primary thing we're here to talk about today. It's a consolidated group of connected dispatchable GERs that can help balance electric supply and demand and provide customer and utility services. When we say dispatchable in the realm of DERs and virtual power plants or VPPs, it's something that can turn on and off, that we can send a message to turn off, we can send a message to turn on. Some cases send a message to throttle a little bit or to pre-cool your home would be an example for a thermostat program. And it's part of why solar isn't necessarily always considered when we talk about DERs or VPPs because we can't talk to it. We can't tell it to turn off, can't tell it to turn on. That's a little bit of a future state. So it's a dispatchable resource. In this case, it's all 4 owner communities will have technologies within our service territories that will contribute to the Platte River kind of virtual power plant. So we're all going to be working together to develop a virtual power plant. Customers volunteer to participate in exchange for incentives. And we base those incentives on what we think that resource is worth to us as a grid. I won't get into the exact details. If somebody wants to, Paul can probably talk to it later, but batteries are worth more, we'll say, than a thermostat might be. It delivers more. It's at the right time of day, things like that, and can serve other purposes. So the incentive is commensurate with kind of the trouble to the customer to do what we want them to do, but also the benefit it serves to the grid. So it's kind of a per kilowatt generally, or per performance that we think they're going to get value we assign to it. Obviously, there's environmental financial benefits as well as increased grid reliability, which is a huge part of getting DERs online, as they can serve a lot of kind of ancillary services for us. We are going to dispatch them. We plan to dispatch our virtual power plant by all owner communities in coordination with Platte River, and we're going to prioritize and maximize benefits kind of all the way from the customer up to Platte River at the generation and transmission level. So we've been going through a lot of exercises to prioritize value-wise and maximize the benefits to kind of all parties involved, and where is that balance? And it's really a significant coordination. And when we say system integration, we generally mean data systems and software systems. So we need to integrate an awful lot of systems together to make this as smart as it needs to be. Paul's going to get a little bit more into that with a really awesome but complicated graph later about our adjacent systems and how they all have to talk to each other. But we've been working together, Paul and me and Susan and everybody on this call, for about 3 years, if not. It preceded me, but for 3.5 years, we've been working together very, very closely on this. Slide. This is actually really great kind of benefits. There's a guidebook or a flip book, as they call them, from RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI. They do these various flip books with interesting things. They have a really great one on VPPs. We put the link there. I would encourage anybody who wants to do a little more digging to look at that a little bit closer. But VPPs, or virtual power plants, are a flexible and virtual solution. Basically, we're trying to make it possible for us to retire our fossil fuel plants, I'm sorry, build more renewables, deal with the load associated with electrification. So additional heat pumps, additional EVs, all of those things put more strain on our grid and can result in higher greenhouse gas emissions generation, right? So if everybody comes home and they plug in their EVs and we don't have something to balance that load with the renewables that were maybe being produced at a different time of day, really puts us in a position of, not being able to retire our coal plants and not necessarily reaching our decarbonization goals. So we've highlighted that here because, well, everything here is important. We do have the 100% renewable by 2030 goal, both at Platte River and at the Longmont community. So that is one of the primary drivers of this, is that we can retire rawhide and we won't have to, for example, run peaker plants on natural gas. A virtual power plant is kind of intended to be in lieu of a peaker plant or in addition to a peaker plant. I think slide. So we talked about this a little bit. Kind of all the different sorts of things that fall into our portfolios and the ways we achieve our goals. Like I said, my title is portfolio manager, so thinking about a lot of these different aspects. We have obviously the utility scale generation that Platte River provides. That includes wind, solar and storage, hydro, and dispatchable resources such as battery storage, which they're actively investing in. We expect, and we'll get into a little more detail in the next slide, we expect across all 4 owner communities, so Austin, Loveland, Estes Park, and Fort Collins, to have 32 megawatts of dispatchable devices enrolled and available in our virtual power plant by the end of 2030. And I'll get more into those details, but we anticipate, based on some projections we're going to get into, that about 8 megawatts of that dispatchable capacity will come from Longmont service territory. We'll get more into how that breaks down. And like we said, that 8 megawatts comes from utility owned resources. When we say that, we mean Longmont Power and Communications, not Platte River. We are actively looking at siting what we might call like a distribution scale battery. So somewhere in the like 100 to 200 kW range. Not so much the big batteries that Platte River does. And that would be something that would contribute and roll up to that 8 megawatts. So we can buy things, we can do things. Our consumers, our customers can own resources. And then we have demand management tools, meaning software. Like we essentially need software, building automation systems, smart meters, all of that to make this work. I think that's everything I was going to say here. Next slide. So I know it's a little busy of a slide, but this is a slide I've used a few times now at council and some other advisory boards. On the left, you'll see the VPP capacity estimate. To back up for just a second, all of these are estimates or projections of anticipated distributed energy resource adoption done for us and the other owner communities in Platte River by a firm that specializes in doing this sort of work. So they take in an awful lot of data that we provided them and market conditions, and they do different scenario planning of what they think communities might see in terms of DER growth. So these are all estimates, and we will update them and keep them active as we move forward. So this is kind of our best information we have at this moment in time. And as we start to build out the VPP and actually see enrollment, we're going to work with Platte River to adjust these numbers as needed. So we might overperform in one area, underperform in the other. We might kind of not, I don't want to say beat down communities, have a more aggressive adoption than one of the other owner communities. So we can kind of play with this as we go. But what you'll see on the left side, I think is really important thing to point out is that you'll see 71 megawatts and 31 megawatts. I said we expect about 31 and a half, so around up to 32 megawatts of dispatchable enrolled devices across all 4 owner communities available to Platte River and us to do different grid and market services. To do that, though, you need a lot more devices to enroll than are actually available at all times. People opt out. They don't have their car plugged in. Their battery is offline. They had an outage and they used their whole battery. Whatever reason it is, you have to over enroll to get how much performance you need out of these devices. So again, we anticipate from projections that we would need to enroll 71 megawatts of dispatchable resources across all 4 owner communities to achieve approximately 32 megawatts of dispatchable DERs, which I believe, and I don't want to speak out of turn because the IRP is not not necessarily my, but that's what is rolled into the integrated resource planning at Platte River. Is they've utilized these numbers as a basis for what they think we can do in terms of VPP performance. On the right side, we have what we think we're going to get at Longmont or in Longmont. So I always call like the Longmont shares of the DERs. For solar, we anticipate behind the meter consumer owned solar, so not utility owned, not utility scale solar, to be 155 megawatts across the 4 Platte River communities. And we expect our share of that to be 32 megawatts by the end of 2030. We currently have 8.1 megawatts, I believe, at my last call. So just over 8. So we'll adjust, like I said, as needed as time goes on. Energy storage, which is certainly one of the most exciting and useful tools that we have in our little VPP toolbox. We expect 47 megawatts across Platte River. We expect 10 megawatts of that to come from Longmont, and that of that 10 megawatts, reliable, dispatchable when we need it, would be about 4 megawatts. So we need to enroll about 10 megawatts of batteries to be able to achieve the 4 megawatts that we have anticipated we'll have available. And we have 0.7 megawatts right now, with very little incentive to actually adopt battery in various ways, and folks are still choosing to do it. So we were pleasantly surprised to find out that we had near to a megawatt of batteries throughout the city at people's homes. Electric vehicles for demand charge management, not necessarily vehicle to grid. So if that's a question anybody has heard about or interested in, is V2G, where you use your car as a battery. That is not included in here, I don't believe, unless Paul corrects me later. It is just managing when people charge their cars and paying them to do it correctly, kind of, not at different times of day. We, as a utility industry, like V2G is pretty futuristic, for lack of a better word. Car manufacturers aren't really letting folks do that. There's some tests like F-150s because they're so large, like that they have been kind of testing out and having folks run their home on it, for example. There are concerns with vehicle battery warranties. So every time you discharge your battery, as a battery, as an actual battery, that counts against essentially your warranty, right? So usually your warranty, sometimes it's years, sometimes it's number of dispatch or events. Car manufacturers and VPP vendors haven't quite figured out how to do that with cars yet, to not void their warranty and use your, Tesla as a backup battery, or us use it for demand response twice a week or once a month or whatever the case is. It just hasn't become programmatic. I haven't heard of any utility, anything at any scale or anything. So we always kind of talk about it in the next few years, and we've considered it interconnection standards and other things. So if you push back energy from your car, like we can let you do that. We know how to, but we just don't see it essentially. So electric vehicles is an awful lot. It's about 42,000 across all the owner communities. We expect just under 14,000 here in the city. I think at most recent count, we're at 2,100. Fully electric vehicles, not plug-in hybrids, not hybrids, but just fully electric. We're just over 2,000. We expect 14,000 with a demand response potential of between 3 and 5 megawatts, which is pretty substantial. Again, it's a large load to shift for the city. And then lastly is traditional demand response. That includes things like thermostats. It's kind of the catch-all bucket of kind of these smaller delivery, but easy for customers to participate in uses. We expect about 5 megawatts across all of Flat River, and I won't say only, but only 1 megawatt from Longmont participants in that more traditional. So again, it would be thermostats, water heaters, heat pumps when they become available, kind of these smaller delivery systems. Then lastly, at the bottom, you'll see in orange, maybe a little hard to see, the VPP will include an additional 20 to 25 megawatts of distribution scale storage that's currently in development. We are working and will be in front of council here not too long on a 5 megawatt, 20 megawatt hour battery at a city substation. So Platte River, we've been working with them and the other owner communities to site essentially 5 megawatt substation batteries in each one of the owner communities. So that is approximately 20 megawatts, or it is 20 megawatts. There might be a fifth one, which would lead us to 25. That isn't included in our 8 megawatts of deliverable, and it's not included in this 31, but it is something that is going to talk to our VPP and be dispatchable by VPP. So an additional demand response. Okay, slide. It's a lot of words on this slide, but I want to talk to you all about, and then I think I'm close to handing over to Paul. I want to talk to you about our Longmont's effort. So we work with Platte River an awful lot. Like I said, we have multiple meetings a week with them on all sorts of things. So we are doing some of our own efforts and our own things that are related to or adjacent to virtual power plants, preparing for them, or doing things we need to get our own grid and our own systems up to snuff for kind of participating. So some of those things are, we've created a grid management system or GMS department staffed by a few folks now. It's under Clint Rhodes, who our director of electrical engineering. I am personally very, very excited for the creation of this team because I have been being asked for a couple years, what do we need to succeed? And I've said software engineers and people who know about software and data. And that is largely what this team is going to do, is work on things like SCADA, AMI, GIS, CIS for the customer information system. So they've been awesome, and they've been up and running for few months now. So we're really, really excited about that. I think you all know our AMI is deployed and we're working on data analytics. Kind of nothing, I'll say this, I think wrong. Nothing we're trying to do with VPP works without AMI meters on the grid. We use them for a variety of purposes to tell us information about what's where and how things are doing. And we use it anonymously in data engines to talk to the VPP and the DERM system a lot to know the state of our utility grid essentially. So not to give a plug for AMI, but there really isn't VPP without AMI. So keeping that in mind. I think Susan has been working on a little bit tangentially to me is a retail rate analysis and benefits and value for large dispatch. So if you come in and you can dispatch 10 megawatts at your data center, for example, what does that look like to us from a retail rate perspective? What might we charge you? What kind of special rate might there be? What's the cost of a large load customer? And what might it be worth to us if they are able to shed some of that load when we need them to. So while that's not VPP specific, because that tends to be a little more smaller residential scale DERs, we are also looking at large C&I commercial industrial type things. I mentioned that we have updated solar storage interconnection standards with communications requirements. We work to make sure that they were, for any nerds out there, UL listed 1547 and IEEE 2035, and that there is potentially Wi-Fi available to the area. So when you do have solar battery, or when we are ready to talk to your solar battery, there's a way to communicate with it. So we did modernize the communication standards required of our interconnected DERs. We have designed an Illuminar community solar program. If you drive up Martin Street, you will see solar on Martin Street Waste Services building. It just got energized about a week ago, and we're going to launch the program in late summer, early fall. It's a small scale demonstration project of community solar here in city limits. It's a 200 kW system. We anticipate about 30 residential households being served by it. Half are going to pay a little more and half are going to get a discount on the energy they purchase from there. So it's designed to be kind of a self-sustaining program. And if things hopefully work out the way that we think they're going to work out, that we could expand that to more households in the future. We just need to kind of start small and cautiously. And then we're also, if you drive by Ascent, up at Ascent at Hover on 17th and Hover, the big apartment buildings there, you'll see solar on almost every roof plane on that building. That is something else LPC has partnered with Longmont Housing Authority and their development partners to put that solar on that roof. It's going to be a virtual net metering demonstration project, which will result in residents getting up to 50% off of their electric utility charge. So really, really excited about that. Really excited. It's been a lot of work. So I'm really excited to see those systems on. We're working on existing DER identification, system of record and mapping. Everything's about data. So we had a spreadsheet that said all the solar we had in the city, and we had a map, but it didn't have a lot of details behind it. So we've spent the last 6 months or so. Jonah's here kind of lurking, but he's my intern fellow, and he's been really, really helpful in doing something where we're collecting more like 25 attributes on every single solar system and then putting them in a GIS database on our SQL server. So we have dynamic DER solar battery specifically data for these different models to ingest. So we didn't have a great system of record, as we say, but that is brand new and really exciting. We're doing smart distribution management equipment. That's a little outside my world, but again, some of the stuff I need to do doesn't work if the grid isn't smart and we can't talk to it. So we're doing some distribution level smart grid planning and like smart switches and things of the sort that will all interact with telling our VPP what's happening on our grid. The ADMS evaluation is an advanced distribution management system. We also need that by 2030. We also need that by 2030 to be able to deal with outages and fluctuations and, oh, we have too much load over here and not enough over here, and that's ADMS will help balance all of that. If any of you are aware, the wastewater treatment plant has put in a battery and solar project on the backside of the Martin Street campus. So we have one up front, they have a little one in the back. They're doing some really interesting analytics around shaping their demand and shaping their demand charges. They are sharing that information with us. So we as a city are learning a ton about how to talk to and program batteries to do what we need them to do. And then lastly, I told you we're doing a 5 megawatt 4-hour battery partnership with Platte River Power Authority, seeking to site a battery at one of our substations. Slide. I don't know. I think it might be. Is this my? Yep.
That's it.
And now it's Paul.
Thanks,
Thank you so much for your
Hannah.
time.
And yeah, and Paul's just going to give us a little more information about how Platte River and the owner communities are working together.
Okay. Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Yep. All right. I'm Paul Davis. I'm Director of Distributed Energy Resources. Been with Platte River since 2001. I came on right when we were starting our first efficiency programs. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then over time grew into this new role that we've created fairly recently. I oversee basically two departments. One is called Distributed Energy Solutions, which is customer facing. It's the customer facing aspects of our programs. How do we bring customers in to participate in efficiency programs, electrification, virtual power plant in the future? And then a Distributed Energy Resources department, which is more focused on how do we bring DERs into the electric utility and how does it work within the utility. So really pleased to be here to talk to you all this evening and appreciate working with Longmont on this. And I'm going to give you a perspective on, from our side of things and how we're working with the other 3 owner communities as well as Longmont to build this virtual power plant. Next slide, please. So Hannah gave a definition of DERs, which we agree with. That's the definition. We also she kind of focused on the VPP and the flexible dispatchable DERs. That definition that she gave is broad enough to encompass all of these things that we call DERs. So energy efficiency is a distributed energy resource. It provides benefits to the grid. It helps customers save energy and money by using less energy for a given task. Electrification is another DER. And so that's technologies like electric vehicles and heat pumps and others that basically allow more efficient, lower carbon electricity to provide services to transportation and buildings and use less carbon in the process. So those are existing programs that we have today. And then on the right side, you see the programs and infrastructure that are under development. And so we talk about dispatchable resources being demand response, which Hannah spoke about, and distributed energy storage, which she also spoke about, those being part of the VPP. Also, and she addressed this as well, solar fits in here in a way because we would like solar to be more visible. Because right now it's all behind the meter and we don't see its effects except in how they show up in our load. But we know solar behaves differently than load, so we want to start to get some of that data. Those are all the DERs that we tend to think about. They're all very different, but they all get lumped together in the category of DER. Next slide, please. So again, focusing on the existing programs, and I just have this one slide, which doesn't really do it justice because we have about 13 people that work on these programs, an annual budget of about $10 million on these programs. But it isn't the main topic today, but it is foundational to the VPP. We established with the owner communities back in 2014 a common brand. We call it Efficiency Works. That allows us to have a broader reach and have more customer awareness as to what are these programs that we are collectively offering together. The programs that exist in Fort Collins are pretty similar and if not identical to the programs that exist in Longmont. We want to make sure everybody knows that these programs exist and are available. And so we have energy efficiency and electrification programs. We are serving all the customer segments from commercial, residential, multifamily, as well as income qualified programs where we partner with Energy Outreach Colorado. You can see down at the bottom the services that these programs rely on and offer. We offer advising and assessments to customers. So an assessment is a more rigorous process. We go into a home or a business and go through a checklist and figure out what things a customer can do to save energy or to electrify. Advising is more targeted, just helping out where a customer has a few specific questions. We work with consultants that provide us these services and provide these services to customers. We also provide information and education via websites and microsites so customers can become informed about their options. We work with service providers. So these are the companies like HVAC installers who might install your high efficiency air conditioning or heat pump or do a lighting retrofit or install an EV charger. We make sure that they are aware of the programs and services that we are collectively trying to offer through Efficiency Works, and they are helping customers participate. And then in some cases, we have incentives to help customers complete an upgrade more cost effectively. And so on the right side, you can see there, since 2002, over the past 22 years, we've invested, Platte River and the owner communities, $120 million in these programs. And we don't often talk about this, but the result of that is we've helped customers save 351,000 megawatt hours. That's a reduction in load of about 11%. And the peak reduction is about 54 megawatts, or 8% of our peak. So next slide, please. Is this where we're at? I think that's the next one, right? Can you go back? I'm lost. Go back to that one. The next one is, yes, that feels right. I didn't have them memorized, but it kind of
Sorry,
makes sense.
Paul.
That's all right. Let's see. So shifting from the existing programs to the new, and specifically the things that Hannah was talking about, flexible DERs that can participate in a virtual power plant. We got our start at the end of 2018 when the Platte River Board of Directors approved the resource diversification policy. And you're probably all familiar with that, but it directed Platte River to work toward a non-carbon electric system by 2030, provided it can be done in a way that's environmentally responsible, reliable, and financially sustainable. And in that policy, and as the board talked about it, and as we thought about it, we said a number of things have to happen to make this possible, to get to that 100% non-carbon electric system. And I won't go into them all, but crucially, many of them relate to better integration of DERs. It said things like, we need loads to be more flexible and to help respond to the intermittency of non-carbon generation. We need better, more cost-effective and higher performing battery storage. We need better integration across the electric utilities from customers through the distribution system to Platte River and to markets. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So it said that these things all have to happen. And we all looked at each other and said, oh, that's going to be a lot of work. And honestly, at that time, it wasn't even clear that, at that time, there were thoughts that maybe the owner communities would do DERs and Platte River didn't have to be involved, and maybe Platte River should do it. And the owner communities didn't have to be involved. And what we did is we said, we need to talk about this. We need to make sure that we're working together and we have a common vision of the future. So we engaged with the Smart Electric Power Alliance, brought them in to support us as we developed this DER strategy. And basically what that strategy came to is we do need to work together. We each have a role to play. It's going to be a lot of collaboration throughout the process. We laid out a vision and guiding principles, and that's what really laid the foundation for us to be here today talking about we're getting close to implementing these programs. Once we went through that strategy, we realized that we needed a DER technology roadmap. Some of the systems already Hannah's alluded to. I'm going to show you some more. We need to get better with technology and data management to be able to really operate a VPP within our complex electric system. And so we worked with a consultant and worked with the owner communities to develop this DER technology roadmap. Once that was done, we set about putting out an RFP to a request for proposal to purchase the key enablers of a virtual power plant, which I'll talk more about in a minute. Not mentioned here is also in 2024, the Platte River Board approved a resolution directing Platte River to begin investing in these systems and to work with the owner communities to do so. And so we're not announcing who we've selected, but we've gotten 2 vendors, and I'll talk more about what the systems are in a minute as a result of that RFP. And so now we're moving into really planning the implementation with those vendors here in this year. Next slide, please. So I think we've said this word integration few times talking about integrating VPPs and DERs across the electric system. This is what this looks like. Obviously, we start with customers at the bottom here, and their role is to adopt DERs and, if they wish, enroll them in the virtual power plant. Then we go to the owner communities. They are investing in the distribution systems that serve the customers and their DERs. They enable the flow of electricity to those DERs, and they support the participation and development of the virtual power plant. So the owner community's distribution systems are critical to ensuring the reliability of the VPP. We want to make sure that the DERs in the VPP can operate and be delivered through the distribution system. There will be times when some resources maybe are curtailed because of an outage or a constraint on the distribution system. We need to make sure we're aware of that. That brings you to Platte River, where we're investing in resources like renewables and dispatchable capacity, including a VPP. And then we will be operating these resources, including a VPP, in the market to support reliability and financial sustainability. And then, of course, at the top here, we have the market. Here we're talking about the Southwest Power Pool Regional Transmission Organization West, RTO West. You've probably heard we have announced that we plan to enter this market in 2026, April. This is an organized market. We've been operating in a bilateral market prior to this, so we're always interacting with other utilities. We don't operate in isolation. So it is always important that we're looking to the region and how we can operate our resources, rely on our neighbors for reliability, sell them resources when we have them available, and purchase resources from them when they have them available and we don't. That's always been there, but the market increasingly is going to help with that, and also provide some requirements and a structure for how DERs can participate in the market. So that's going to be crucial for us to be paying attention to and working toward making sure that we can integrate and provide value within that market structure. Next slide, please. So I think this is the slide Hannah was alluding to, sort of the systems that we need to make this all happen. Focusing in the light blue box sort of in the middle, what you see are the purple boxes on the right that say customers with DERs. So we start there. We want to communicate with people's electric vehicles and chargers, their batteries, their commercial, industrial, demand response, smart appliances. To do that, most of that communication is going to happen over the homes or businesses' Wi-Fi to those smart devices that are operated by DER device partners. So think of companies like Tesla, General Motors, ChargePoint. They're the ones that provide this capability to communicate with devices. Those companies really don't want to work with 3,000 electric utilities in the country. They would rather work with fewer companies, and we also don't want to have to sign agreements with 50 or 60 different vendors as well. So we work with companies that you would call an aggregator or a VPP partner. That's the next level here to the left. They operate something you might call an edge DERMS, or an edge distributed energy resources management system. It's edge because it's at the edge of the grid. And so these companies have relationships with those DER device partners. They have integrations to their systems to support communication to all those devices and to support enrollment. And then they provide services back to the electric utility, primarily to allow bulk dispatch of those DERs. So what Platte River would be looking for: can we turn on all the electric vehicles? Because right now we have a glut of wind and solar, and we're actually looking at selling energy at a loss. Good time to use energy. Or flip it around, and now we don't have enough wind and solar. Energy prices are high, or we're looking at starting an aero turbine. Would rather not do that. So can we call on loads to reduce, or can we call on batteries to discharge? That's the sort of thing that edge DERMS can do for us. Turn most of the systems on and off according to the bulk electric system needs. Brings you over then to this enterprise DERMS and owner community tenants and the grid DERMS. This is a different type of DERMS. This DERMS can control that edge DERMS and can control other edge DERMS. We might ultimately have multiple edge DERMS to do this kind of job. But that grid DERMS brings in distribution system awareness. So we'll bring into this system a map of each owner community's distribution system. We'll be able to locate these DERs on the system, and we will be able to start to control DERs within the limits and constraints of the distribution system. And in some cases, the owner communities may also see benefit to calling on resources when they have an overload in a particular section of the grid. And then they can use that grid DERMS to call on specific resources. You'll see hanging off that is data management. We need to get better at Platte River and the owner communities at managing data needed to feed into that DERMS. Where are all the DERs? What are their capabilities? Just a couple examples. Over to the left just talks about the various enablers of the virtual power plant, various systems that Platte River and the owner communities either have or are in the process of adding that will be important to operating the DERMS. That was a lot on that slide. Maybe I think we go to the next slide, please. So we've touched on this before. When people hear DER, they often think of solar, and we do too. It's likely to be our largest DER by capacity. It already is, and probably stay that way for a while. It's not currently dispatchable, and it's not visible. And like I said, if we want to forecast load accurately, we need to have a better handle on what solar is doing within our load. So in the near term, our grid DERMS has, the one we're looking at, has capabilities to help us with visibility and forecasting of solar. It can use meter data when you have real-time meter data coming off of solar. Some of them do, but most of them don't. And if they don't, what we can do is we can model the behavior of solar based on its nameplate characteristics and based on weather data. How much sun is there today? And so we'll have a much better estimate of what solar is doing at any given moment. Currently, we have 50 megawatts. And that's on a load that might range from 500 to 700 megawatts. So that's a pretty big chunk that could be swinging our load without really us knowing what it's doing. So having that information will be very helpful to support reliable grid operations. There's potential future use cases as well that we're just starting to think about, and other utilities are as well. And that's using the advanced inverter functions that are provided under IEEE 1547/2018. And those advanced inverter functions give some capabilities to utilities to access these capabilities and ask inverters to actually help us manage voltage on the system, or to provide ride through if there's a dip in voltage or frequency, or to provide real-time data and show us how they're operating. So that's something we're thinking about. It would be a significant project at this point, and it's better to watch some other utilities as they figure it out and spend the time on it. And we're also talking to the Electric Power Research Institute, or EPRI. They're looking at this and working on this as well. So we'll try to learn from them before we go dive into a new project like this. Next slide. Thank you. So where would we go from here as we start to implement these systems? In 2025, we are building our programs, planning our systems and processes, again, for the edge DERMS and programs and for the grid DERMS. Meeting very regularly with the owner communities and our consultants and our vendors on this. 2026, we're targeting launch of programs where we'll start to enroll customers. We'll start to be able to test the system and really learn how this works. As we move into 2027 and 2028, we will be working toward what we call market dispatch. Prior to this time, we'll be operating DERs as what we call a load modifier. In other words, Platte River and the owner communities get to decide how can we modify these DERs to reduce the load that we present to the market. That'll provide some benefits. Over time, to access all the benefits of DERs, it's probably going to be important that they operate as a resource, like a generator. That's what I mean when we say as a resource or market dispatch. They need to operate like a generator, not as a change in load, which means that we need to present real-time telemetry to the market. We need to tell the market, hey, we've got this resource. It can perform in such and such a way at a certain cost, and the market will decide if our bid for that service, let's say it's energy, is in the money and should be dispatched. And if it's in the money and should be dispatched, they'll send a signal that automates the dispatch of that resource, and we need to perform. So that's what market dispatch looks like. Something we're working towards in 2027 timeframe. And then as we get into the end of the decade, we're looking at integrating and participate or doing distribution management of DERs, which is to integrate the owner community's advanced distribution management systems into the DERMS. That allows us to provide much more, much higher resolution of control relative to your distribution systems, as we talked about before. So that really comes into full play late in the decade. And then beyond that, we're starting to really operate this resource as a way of helping us support decarbonization of the electric system. Next slide. Okay. I don't know. It sounds like we haven't taken questions yet. Javier is going to give a brief update. I don't know if we're going to take questions now or afterwards. Because he's moving to other areas and departing from the VP questions.
Yeah, he's covering kind of non-overlapping topics.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I think it might be a good time to get some questions for you, Paul, and for you, Hannah, and members of the board. It might be prudent to recognize that there's a little more coming on the broader topic. So let's manage our time well. Does anyone have any? Go ahead, Ralph.
Thank you, Paul and Hannah. Just a quick question. Obviously, it was mentioned several times, and I don't know much about this, so this may not be a very intelligent question. And that is the importance of being able to monitor what's happening with solar, residential solar. So I wanted to know what the plans were. I mean, I don't know if there's off-the-shelf metering that you could incentivize homeowners to, install that helps you. What's the plan for? Because this I see as being something at street level that's going to continue to grow and hopefully help us with our electric needs.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to take that, Hannah, or do you want that?
I can talk about it a little bit and then you can see what you might want to add on. When it comes to solar on the distribution grid, we have a couple of things that we're hoping to help inform us. We're doing the DER system of record, as I mentioned. So previously we didn't have like an integrated platform that said there is solar at all of these addresses and this is how big it is and this is what module type it is, so on and so forth. What's helpful about that is that we will be feeding into the grid DERMS, and they do essentially like machine learning forecasting of what they expect local solar systems to be producing in any given moment, as well as kind of future predictions. So we'll be working with Platte River on that forecast model, which we're really excited about. The other part that's exciting is, as you mentioned, kind of we don't require production meters for residential solar. So we don't have necessarily the best production data for that. One thing that's going to help inform our forecast model is that the solar systems, that the larger commercial scale solar systems that are being installed do have production meters and AMI meters. So over on Martin Street, the new solar, up at Ascent at Hover, Village on Main Street, and there'll be continuing to be more of them. And what's nice is those can act as bellwether systems for how solar is acting in the city. So our 8 megawatts of solar on residences and some commercial users that we have as well. We're going to use AMI and forecasting to kind of see what we're doing and what it might have impacts on particular feeders being overloaded, so on and so forth. We're also going to use the bellwether systems and potentially local weather data from our weather stations. So we're going to try and paint a good picture without necessarily having to install any new equipment in people's homes. Anything to add, Paul?
No, nothing to add.
Okay.
All right, Corkit, you got your hand raised?
Yeah. I'm trying to understand. I mean, I have panels and I have this program telling me day to day the amount of energy produced and gives me yearly summary as well.
Yes.
What else are you looking for?
What you're looking at is only typically available to the consumer. So a consumer interface that your vendor has provided you based on inverter data, we do not have access to that. So we can't see what residents are producing through their inverters because we don't have access. And then most inverters aren't kind of smart enough to tell us. So we do have a challenge with not knowing essentially the true generation of our solar at any given moment. So we're kind of working on that from the back end from our own solar systems again. So Martin Street, Ascent, things that we own and control, we will have great user interfaces as well. But again, it's just something we can't access.
And not that it would be impossible necessarily. That would get back to that idea of how many different inverter companies do we have to work out agreements with to allow them to access the data, which they will probably say is your data and would require you to approve us to have it and so on. And they're probably going to want to charge us for it and charge us to perform a system integration. Some utilities have gone down that road, but what they also tend to see is some of those companies go out of business. And so all that investment ends up not being useful. And so, when we talked about the standards-based communication to smart inverters, there are utilities that are trying to establish direct standard-based communication to an inverter. That's what's built into modern inverters. That way they know that the utility owns the communication path the whole way to that inverter, and they can keep it reliable. But that has an investment as well. So it's sort of, do you invest in something that will last a little while, might go away, or do you go down the road of investing in something that's always yours that might be more costly? So that's why we're taking a wait and see stance.
I had a question, Hannah, that might precede your time in your current role. Back in October 2021, this board got a presentation about a smart thermostat program. I think it was with Ecobee. We were piloting like demand response essentially in people's homes.
Yeah.
I never really got an update on that. Did we actually roll that out? Was it successful?
I'm going to let Susan speak to that, actually. It was her program, along with my colleague Eliana, who's still here with the city and is such an asset. But they did that, and that was the summer before I joined. So I'm going to let her speak to that.
I'm glad that you remember that, Robert. It was a good opportunity for us to test the waters with Ecobee. They were friendly and were willing to work with a very small number of thermostats. We had less than 100 enroll, and we operated the program over a summer. And what we were hoping to accomplish is to confirm performance with other best practices that we saw in the industry, kind of understand how to message to customers and what would resonate with customers, what kind of outcomes we could anticipate. We also looked at, who opted out. We ran test scenarios of 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours. When do we lose people? What are the things that what are the barriers to a smart thermostat being able to deliver a certain kW response? And the learnings from our demonstration kind of matched up with what the program in Fort Collins has been able to produce, as well as programs across the United States. And that's about the time that we started working closely with Platte River and the other owner communities on the distributed energy resource roadmap. And so we felt like we had good data, but it didn't make sense for us to launch our own program, knowing that we were anticipating launching a similar program regionally. But we do feel like the data validated industry standards and what we expect to see in the future with the VPP.
That's perfect. My follow-up question on it was, how does that influence any of like the incentives or like rate structure development for, demand response and like DER? Yeah, yeah, I sort of see them all as interrelated. It was a really good opportunity to sort of see how our community responded and how does
Yeah, it
that
was a
shape
great
our.
opportunity, and we did a customer survey at the end and got really a good response rate from those people that participated. And we got a confirmation that the incentive that we provided was enough to keep them interested. You know, at the outset, of course, everybody would have appreciated a larger incentive, but that's to be expected. But there wasn't anyone that said, no, it wasn't worth it. I would definitely not do this again unless you paid me much, much more. It was like, you know, yeah, I wanted to do it. It was nice to have the extra incentive. We would continue to participate. I'm generalizing, not everybody said that, but overall the response was good. And we're gonna incorporate the learning from our survey and from our program, along with what Fort Collins has been doing for a number of years, to help the owner communities in Platte River kind of dial in on the incentive structure. And we're also going to rely on the virtual power plant vendor, which has experience, you know, beyond our region, and kind of pool our knowledge and come up with something that we think is going to work in our region.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions before we let Javier switch to a similar but different topic? Seeing none, let's keep going.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, Javier Camacho with Platte River Power Authority. Good to be with you all again. It's been about a year since I've had the opportunity to last address your board. The last time we were here, we were also joined by our resource planner, Masood Ahmad, where we were presenting on the IRP. So good to be back with you all with some updates that are happening here at Platte River, as well as some high-level discussion on our next IRP. But before we get there, since I've had an opportunity to address you all before, hopefully many of you may remember who I am. But if not, I oversee our external and government affairs here at Platte River Power Authority. So I have the opportunity to work with all of our municipalities that we serve, including Longmont. So I get to work with the great staff and team over at Longmont Power and Communications, along with other city staff in other departments across the municipality. So really happy to be here again to talk about the partnership between Platte River and Longmont Power and Communications. And then we are also joined by another colleague of ours who is my new boss, a new team member at Platte River. So I thought I'd just very briefly pass the mic over to him, Tim Blodgett, who is our new Chief Strategy Officer, and I'll let him introduce himself as he just joined about 2 months ago. Tim?
And you're muted, Tim.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Well, it's good to be with you and appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Javier. It's good to be with the board this evening, and thank you for, again, allowing me to join. And as Javier mentioned, I'm new to the Platte River team. I'm 8 weeks in, so they're already calling me a veteran, which makes me a little bit nervous. But I come with a lot of years of public power experience. I've been in public power since 1998. Before that was in the utility space. But since 1998, I had the opportunity to lead the American Public Power Association, the national trade association that represents the 2,000 government-owned electric utilities across the U.S., lead a services subsidiary of theirs. And so I did that up until 2021. And then I transitioned over to a joint action agency similar to Platte River Power Authority, by the name of Missouri River Energy Services out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that had 61 owners in 4 states. And I was part of that team for a little over 3 years before having the opportunity to come to Platte River. So I had worked with Platte River briefly in the past in a little bit of a consulting role from a strategic planning and governance board development with the PRPA board and executive team back in 2018. So it was good to reconnect and look forward to working with all the owner communities, all of you, and just appreciate being part of the team and being in Colorado. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tim, for taking that chance to introduce yourself. And as he mentioned, I'm sure you'll be seeing him whether it's in the community of Longmont or at City Council or at other meetings like this. So, and always happy to connect you with Tim if you have any other questions. But in regards to other great updates and other activity that's happening at Platte River Power Authority, as Hannah and Paul went through, there's a lot of work that is happening in the VPP and DER space. That is all a major element, but one element of our greater strategy of working towards a non-carbon energy future through our resource diversification policy that our board adopted back in 2018, which already was 7 years ago. So of course, as you all know, your board our Platte River board, specifically with Longmont, is represented by the mayor, so Mayor Peck, and then of course your second board representative, the your LPC director, Daryl Hahn, who is the second representative on our board. Now, in terms of other projects, we do have a big announcement that we made just a couple of months ago, where we announced our 100 megawatt short duration utility scale battery storage system project. It's a mouthful, but we're incredibly excited for this project because it is our very first utility scale battery storage system that Platte River will be adding to its generation portfolio. Really important, again, another very important piece to this larger strategy. Many of you may know, but we did have, well, we still do, but it was a small battery at our Rawhide Energy Station. It's a Tesla battery, a 1 megawatt storage battery, and that was an opportunity for Platte River to learn how to work with the battery to dispatch it during different times of the day to understand how it operates. And so we've been doing that for several years now, and now we have the ability to introduce a 100 megawatt 4-hour duration battery storage system. This project actually is going to be built out in Weld County. If you are aware of our solar array project that is being built at this very moment, called Black Hollow Sun Solar Array, that is in Severance, Colorado. So the short duration battery storage system will actually be built adjacent to this new solar array. And this is actually in unannexed land in the Weld County area. So just east of I-25, just south of Severance. So that is certainly a project that we are very excited about. And we are looking at planning an event around the announcement of this start of this project before it begins construction. So we can certainly keep you all looped in on that information as well as our other communication platforms like social media and press releases that we do post on our website. So that is one big project that's currently underway. In terms of other non-carbon generation, we, as I'd mentioned, have our solar array project that is currently under construction. That is Black Hollow Sun. This was an exciting project, but one that was certainly in the pipeline for quite some time. Unfortunately, this was one of those projects that got sort of wrapped up in the whole pandemic chaos where projects were certainly timelines were being pushed out. There was a lot of uncertainty. So discussions around this project began back in 2019. Took several years, but we've managed to get to a point where we were able to finally break ground. And we held a groundbreaking ceremony last year in July for 150 megawatts of solar through this Black Hollow project. But at that announcement, at that groundbreaking, we were able to announce a second phase to that project, and we were really excited. So this project went from being 150 megawatts to now 257 megawatts. So this project is going to be broken up into two phases. So phase one, 150 megawatts. We're anticipating commercial operation and generation for phase one to happen later this year. And then phase two will begin construction kind of right when phase one is being completed. And phase two, which will be 107 megawatts, that should start generating power by late next year. So again, we'll be adding 257 megawatts of utility scale solar to our portfolio, which is we're very excited about. And then last thing I'll quickly touch upon is our 2028 integrated resource plan. As I'd mentioned earlier, we were here just about a year ago presenting on our 2024 IRP. At Platte River, we are a customer of the Western Area Power Administration. So as a customer, we complete an IRP every 3 to 5 years. Historically, we've done it on a 5-year cycle. But since our board has passed our this non-carbon energy policy that put us on an accelerated pathway towards that goal, our CEO has asked us to complete an IRP every 4 years. So our next IRP will be in 2028. And we will certainly be doing a lot of community engagement around the 2028 IRP. As you can imagine, our resource planners have already begun work on developing what that 2028 IRP will look like. Of course, they're very much in the early stages of this, but it is an iterative process, something that's worked on every single day. In 2026, we will be launching our community engagement rollout. So we will certainly be back to let you all know what the details of that community engagement will look like, what the calendar will look like, and when you can anticipate us to be back in the Longmont community, both with you all with the Sustainability Advisory Board, but in general within Longmont, in order to engage you with our IRP on that front. But we want you to know that we are certainly thinking about what worked during the 2024 IRP and opportunities for us to revisit as we complete our 2028 IRP. So certainly something that we're looking forward to, especially in engaging our community and all of you all as the retail users of Longmont Power and Communications. So those were some quick updates and highlights happening with Platte River, all under the scope of the resource diversification policy, and certainly happy to take any questions. And it looks like Ethan, I saw your hand go up, so happy to take your question.
Thank you, Javier. You're building the Black Hollow solar array in the middle of Hale Alley. How do you intend to protect the solar panels from hail damage?
So as you probably know, this generation project is through a power purchase agreement. And so our developer is Contour Global. And so they are technically the owners and operators of this generation project. And this is certainly something that they're well versed in terms of building solar generation projects where obviously there are chances for inclement weather. And so they certainly have a plan on how to maintain solar panels. Thankfully, technologies have improved where they're a lot more hail resistant, and while not completely formidable type of infrastructure, but certainly something that they will certainly keep an eye on. The other thing, and what makes it more advantageous to pursue a PPA, a power purchase agreement, is the fact that your developer, we are the sole off-taker, Platte River Power Authority. We are the sole customer for this generation, but they have a contractual obligation in order to meet the amount of generation that we've agreed to when we signed into this agreement. So, what if there is some type of limitations or curtailments due to inclement weather like hail damage when it comes to this generation project, they certainly still have an obligation to meet their contract in order for us to get the non-carbon generation that we've signed up for. So that is the information that I have at the moment to that question, Ethan. But if you are looking for more information or insight on that, happy to follow up with you or work through Lisa to get that information over to you.
Do you have any other questions for Javier?
I have so many questions, but I don't
Well,
want to
let me ask one more and then give you a chance if you have another one, Ethan. And this may actually kind of go to anybody who's presented before here. The tax credits that have been in place the last couple of years are under consideration for being sunset in the federal legislation that's being considered at the moment. Are we taking any active steps to try to ensure grandfathering or anything like that with any of the upcoming battery or solar implementations that we're trying to do?
Yeah, that's a good question, Robert. I would, what I would say to that is we know that financially speaking, as a public power utility, you know, it's more financially advantageous for us to go through the power purchase agreement route. That allows for the developers to take advantage of those tax credits since obviously we are tax exempt entities. So that has allowed us to do that. Plus, it also eliminates a lot of the risk that we would essentially have to inherit if we were to take that route. We certainly know that any repeal of these tax credits could have financial implications, particularly in non-carbon or renewable generation projects moving forward. While there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what the reconciliation bill will look like in the next several days as the Senate continues to deliberate on their version of the bill, we know and have maintained very good communication with our federal policymakers for our state, for our service region. And so they certainly know what's at risk when it comes to that. We don't have any Republican policymakers in the Senate here in Colorado. So we have leaned very heavily into our national associations like the Large Public Power Council, which is a very similar to the organization Tim alluded to, the American Public Power Association, but this one represents the 28 large public power utilities in the country, Platte River being one of them. And so we're certainly calling upon our associations to influence and inform our Republican federal policymakers on what this could mean. And it's pretty interesting understanding that so many of these projects are actually in more red leaning or more conservative leaning states within the country. So there could be certainly some financial implications within their own districts as well. But when it comes to the grandfathering, that I don't have a lot of detail to speak to, but that I would certainly say it is one that is hard to answer at this moment without looking into it further. But I can tell you right now, we are keeping an eye on that and also trying to ensure that the projects that we do have are beginning construction as quickly as possible. Understanding there are many elements that we're navigating right now.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if it's like a free-for-all question, but I do want to answer.
Sure. Yeah.
The City of Longmont are two projects. So the Martin Street Solar and the Ascent at Hover, we are applying for Inflation Reduction Act direct pay dollars on both of those projects. They're going to be energized in 2025. So all of our substantial technical assistance and legal folks are saying that we are likely to be able to grandfather in, for lack of a better word. And if this group is interested, we are applying not just for the 30% income tax credit, but we are looking to get a 20% bonus for low income adder, which is an allocation and not guaranteed, but on both projects, we expect 50% return on both of those projects, which could we, if everything goes to plan, we'll reinvest in a future solar installation, most likely.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Okay, well, thank you, Javier, Hannah, Paul. Oh, Ethan, go ahead.
Yeah, is my mic on? Yeah, it is. Okay, so recently in Michigan, the federal government ordered a coal plant to remain open under the authority of the Federal Power Act. Do you think that that's going to happen in Colorado? And do you have a plan for that?
I'll start even by saying right now it's hard. I wouldn't be able to speak for all utilities within the state of Colorado. So if there are currently utilities within the state of Colorado who are pursuing, extending the life of coal-fired generation within their portfolio, I would say that's something that we would learn alongside you. As of right now, Platte River Power Authority still continues to work towards retiring our owned coal-fired generation asset, which is Rawhide Unit 1 at our Rawhide Energy Station north of Wellington, and which is set to retire by the end of the decade, end of 2029. We are part owners of Craig's Stations Units 1 and 2 out in Craig, Colorado. Craig Unit 1, which is slated to retire by the end of this year, and Craig 2 by the end of 2028. That's still currently the plan. But that, again, we're co-owners there with Tri-State being the operators of that plant. And I see Tim, you have your hand up. So Tim, was there something that you'd like to add to this particular question? Oh, it looks like he needs to be unmuted. Or given permission to unmute, I guess.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ethan, I was just going to add there too, that Michigan plant is in the MISO North RTO region, and that region has some very it's kind of in the bullseye, if you will, from a reliability standpoint of loss of dispatchable generation, and so it's put some criticality on some of that base load generation that was looking at being retired. I don't think we at this point in time anticipate that in our region, but that is something that could happen. But it's that one was kept online, from what I understand, purely from a reliability standpoint for the grid protection.
I reviewed the April 2025 long-term fuel supply presentation that PRPA gave to its board of directors, and that seems to indicate that there is a grid reliability challenge, if not crisis, that PRPA will have after 2030. So do you think there's not a grid reliability problem in northern Colorado?
Well, I think that remains to be seen at this point in time. I know from a projection standpoint, it's definitely a concern, and we will have an obligation to the market when we've committed to entering into SPP West, the organized market Southwest Power Pool that was referenced earlier by Paul and I think Javier as well. And we are required to have so much reserve margin as an entity in that market. And so right now, that's why we're looking at the arrows. The aeroderivatives, and just had the 1041 permit approved by Larimer County as that, giving us that reserve margin we need. And so I know at a higher level, I may be making my answer too complicated there from an industry standpoint, but we are definitely reviewing that from our standpoint. And at this point in time, other utilities are as well that'll be entering that market. But at this point in time, we're not short on capacity, but there is a risk of that in the future if we try to move too fast without being able to have that dispatchable generation and that reserve margin that's needed for those, 1 day a year events that are where we lack that, especially if units are lost in the region.
And what's the status of your air quality modeling and air pollution permit?
Hold on, Ethan. Hang on. Thank you, Tim. Ethan, I think we may need to move on the agenda here. I want to make sure we don't go outside the bounds of this. There's a lot of good topics to talk about with our friends at PRPA. but it sounds like air quality monitoring might be going outside the scope of what we'd really intended to cover today with DERs and virtual power plants. Did you have anything else kind of on that major topic, or?
I've got pages of questions, but I can follow up with
I-
PRPA at a different time, hopefully.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, thank you to all the people who presented and answered, Javier, Tim, Hannah, Paul. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the next item up on our agenda is the public invited to be heard. Becky, I don't see any members of the public on the call. Is that?
That is correct. We were not joined by any members of the public.
Okay, well then we will keep on moving. The next item on our agenda under other business is to finalize the fueling station position statement. Daniel, would you like to take us through that?
Sure. Can you all hear me okay? My wireless has really
Audio is great.
hit the bucket in the last 20 minutes. So if I jump off, that's what's going on. But yeah, if we sent around that draft of the recommendation, and there were a couple items. So you saw in the packet for this week in an updated version, I highlighted in red some additions and removals from the recommendation that we need to approve as a board, just because they were pretty substantive. So I wanted to make sure no one was surprised by those being included in the final letter. Let me see if I can I share my screen. Is it going to let me? Could I ask someone else to share their copy of this to the screen? It is not letting me.
Do you want me to see if I can do that?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, Lisa. Sorry, I'm pushing the share button, but nothing's happening.
Yeah, I will try. Let's see. Can you see that?
There we go. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Is it too big or too small? I might make it 100. Is that okay, size-wise?
That's great for me.
Okay, Daniel, just feel free to holler when you're ready for me to scroll.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Working
Sure.
around the tech. Could you scroll down to recommendations, and it's going to be the first item. So noting here, Ethan had recommended we actually remove using AI as a recommended tool. So I'm just raising that. If everyone's okay with that. If anyone has any issues, though, do you just want to raise that now? Great. In that case, Lisa, if you want to scroll down to current and future land use conditions. And so this second item there, adding this item, new fueling station application should require a public hearing process, ensuring residents have an opportunity to review and comment on proposals through a transparent public process. In a couple of other areas in the recommendation, we do mention wanting to make sure the community has the opportunity to have input, but this is an explicit recommendation that Ethan suggested we add into here as well. So just checking if anyone has any issues, if you want to raise those now.
Would this be different than like any other kind of zoning type hearing? Or are we suggesting something different? And to be fair, I don't do much in this space, and so I don't really know what hearings the public is invited to participate in already.
I noted in my response to Daniel that I think the city already has that baked into the process, but I thought it might be good to be explicit that it's a best practice.
We shouldn't undo that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Okay.
No angst for me.
I think I would just note that somewhere so that it acknowledges that that we know that that's already part of the process,
That's not a bad
or
idea.
noting the importance of ensuring that this continues to be part of this process or something.
I was
like
just
that.
gonna say, Lisa, we could go with applicant should new fueling station applicant should continue to require a public hearing process if we had continue in there.
Yeah, something along those lines. I might also look to Councilmember Popkin. I know, having served on the Planning and Zoning Commission, he might have some other specific recommendations there.
Yeah, is the goal, it might depend on whether the fueling station application is what type of development application it's considered, whether it's a major or minor or other type of development proposal. It might be worth before, just given the sensitivity of a public hearing and the role of a public hearing process, it might be worth just clarifying with Grant and the planning department before this is formally like I think the board can make a recommendation here, but it might be worth just double checking before that's like formally submitted to city council as to what process would be followed or what a new fueling station proposal would be considered within the planning process. I'm trying to think of the ones that I've reviewed, which it actually fell into. I'm drawing a blank on that at this moment.
I'm happy to follow up with that. I did also want to just make a recommendation to add somewhere in the, maybe in the conclusion, Daniel, is these are kind of first pass recommendations, and that any of these would need to be further vetted before they would be considered for approval. So because we did a very cursory pass at this, and I want to make sure council understands that these are considerations, but that if we were to move forward, if they were to direct us to move forward, there's a lot more research and analysis and vetting that would go into that. So I think it would be good to just clarify that. And that way also, if there's some of these things that we might say that at some point along the line, someone from a different department says that's not quite how it works, like that, we understand that that's the case, but it's still up to city council to decide if they want to move anything forward.
Lisa, just one question. I don't think this was part of Councilmember McCoy's motion originally, but it could also be a recommendation from SAB to council to send this to the Planning and Zoning Commission too for input. Maybe that's not the board's place and that's council's place, but just wanted to say
Yeah,
that.
I think I know planning and zoning was mentioned, but I think it was where what we had come to was that this really needs to go to council first, and then they would determine whether or not to move it forward, and if so, if they wanted it to go to planning and zoning first.
Okay.
So that we checked the text on the motion, and it was to make a recommendation to planning and zoning and city council. That was in the motion text. So that's yeah.
Okay.
Which I duplicated in here, but yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the question is like, at least I like your point of maybe including in the inclusion. These are recommendations. We're not making solid policy adjustments here. Is that this is all done in consideration of planning and zoning's decision making, city council's decision making, just recommendations.
Yep.
Catch up. So then on this item 2, then we'll add this text then: new fueling station application should continue to require a public hearing process. We will also then down in the conclusion add a section acknowledging these are recommendations to be considered. I'll work up some text and circle back on that. Lisa, oh, you're already there. So on item 4, then y'all. Also, Ethan, you can speak a little more to this, but the recommendation to, in particular, limit new gas fueling stations to the southwest region of the city, with a temporary moratorium on the development of new gas fueling stations elsewhere. based on, it sounds like, some research, Ethan, that you did.
Well, I just tried to do the geospatial analysis that staff didn't do and look at where gas stations are located around Longmont, and it seems that the southwest quadrant is where there's a lack of gas stations or fueling stations, and there might be sufficient fueling stations elsewhere around the city. So that could perhaps use more study to see if that's really true, but I looked at a map and that seemed to be the case.
Yeah, I don't know where everyone else is on this, but for me, I like the idea of suggesting that from our preliminary study, it appears as though there may be a need or a increased demand in one portion of the city, whereas there's saturation in another portion, but the more study. I don't know that I like the idea of proposing a moratorium somewhere specifically, or without any real definition. I don't know. But just one person. Go ahead, Ralph.
I also had a little of a reaction to that. I would understand sort of identifying these considerations without a specific, limiting a particular area so that, and I apologize. I've started work at 6 this morning. My brain's a little fuzzy, and Daniel was terrific at this. I recognize that there should be a process that's taking into consideration what motivated Ethan without there being a specific moratorium, which gets into sort of government regulation and free enterprise and all other kinds of issues that, sort of get triggered. So I don't know if you can sort something out of that comment that makes sense, but I also had a little of a reaction to something that specific. Thank you.
Perhaps something along the lines of, limiting new fueling stations to areas where there's inadequate existing supply and disfavoring those in areas where there's adequate service currently provided, something along those lines.
Yeah, taking that into consideration, yes.
Well, and I wonder with the bulk of the text, since we are saying, we've already said the placement of stations should be evaluated based on their demand geographically. And so I wonder, Ethan, to integrate with what you're saying, maybe we could adjust that to say, for as an example. So for example, based on preliminary geographic analysis, limiting new gas fueling stations to the south region should be considered. Does that make sense? So make it an example rather than a direct recommendation based on some preliminary research.
I'm fine with that.
Does that sound okay? Great. Okay. Any other thoughts there? Sorry, before we move on. Sorry, trying to keep us on our time. Cool. Let's scroll down to then under environmental considerations, a new item 5. I think, Ethan, this was your recommendation too, right, Ethan? So a robust environmental evaluation matrix should be used to ensure that new fueling stations meet the highest environmental and safety standards, and that permitting decisions are based on consistent measurable criteria. Any thoughts, opposition, edits to that? Yeah, Ralph.
You're on
sorry.
mute. Ralph, you're on mute. You might not be able to hear us, Ralph. You're on mute. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. I know it's getting late. Just very quickly, I see this as capitalized, so I'm not familiar with this, but is an environmental evaluation matrix a particular document in the public sector that people will understand, or is that just a suggestion that some sort of an environmental evaluation be done, in which case I would take the capitalizations off? So it confuses me a little, so I just wanted to understand, and if it is a known particular procedure, that it be defined a little bit.
I'm not attached to capitalization.
It gets used in different ways. Yeah, I actually looked into this. I checked AP style; they had nothing to say. So it gets, and some folks capitalize it, others don't. So I would say we just don't capitalize it, but it is a commonly recognized term in environmental evaluations. So I'll just remove those caps. Boom. Cool. Any other thoughts there? Cuckoo. Let's move on to sustainability and public health and safety concerns. And so the first one is to remove this recommendation on above ground storage of flammable liquids in tanks. Any thoughts there?
So this is obviously a challenging issue, right? There are public health and safety consequences in both directions, right? It's much more hazardous above ground and easier to be vandalized and damaged, whereas below ground, it's easier for it to leak and no one to notice and cause a whole bunch of problems down the line. I kind of like the proposal of including it, but maybe with a caveat that acknowledges that there are other public safety considerations beyond the sustainability sphere that need to be weighed.
And isn't reclamation an issue with underground, which is one reason why people want to do them above ground? So,
Yeah.
my concern here, I'm sorry, I didn't even raise my hand, I'm jumping in, but my concern is that we're overstretching, we're overreaching a little bit here where we may not have the expertise, and it concerns me a little bit. If there's a particular concern, we may want to make a note of that rather than, addressing code specifically. My thoughts.
Lisa, I think you're going to say something. We can, or unless you want to defer
I
to
was just
Councilmember
going
Popkin.
to add, yeah, that this did come from someone in our fire department. And I think adding that caveat that these are high level recommendations that would require additional analysis and vetting before anything moved forward. But just to know where the source of that came from was someone in the fire world. So but again, that's all the information I have. But go ahead, Councilmember Popkin.
At least, are you saying the source of the striking was from the fire department,
No,
or
the actual recommendation of allowing above ground storage, larger than
that was a recommendation from our fire department?
Mhm.
Okay. That's very helpful to know. Yeah, and again, if there's an area where SAB feels this should be investigated further but doesn't have the answer, that's also okay and welcome from council's perspective as an advisory board. You're advising us that you're thinking about this and saying, hey, we don't know the answer yet, but we think this is worth council's time to explore further. So you don't have to perfect language in some areas if you want to make a recommendation that says this is worth further exploration.
With those perspectives, for me, I think we should. I like the idea of keeping that bullet point 3 included.
I'm inclined to as well. I think it also it strikes a contrast of thinking outside of the box on solutions as well. Yeah, that these are the kinds of things we should be looking into. So I would be inclined to include it.
I'm a hard no on that, so I'll vote against this if it's included, but whatever.
Ethan, can you give me the 30-second version of your hard no? Like the rationale?
Well, I think you already explained it, that it's a safety hazard.
Gotcha.
Well, let's keep moving on then to item 4. As guidelines and regulations are updated to address these issues, fire safety related to the placement of fueling stations should be considered, including any above ground storage of gasoline and electric vehicle charging stations. Any thoughts here? We had discussed this one in our meeting too. Thank you so much, Ralph, for raising that as well. I had missed it in my notes. But if there aren't any issues, we can.
I just reviewed the minutes of our meeting, which Heather provided back to me, and saw that this was what we discussed, and that was the reason I suggested putting it back in.
think that is that it on the
That is it.
recommended changes?
And so I think the only thing to address what Lisa said in the conclusion, I think we could add a sentence, and I'll read this out for folks. These are high-level recommendations that should be investigated further before implementation and were made by the board after preliminary investigations. Just to reiterate that these really are recommendations and not, you know, that we might be wrong. With that, how do we do this then? Can we go ahead and vote on, I've tracked all these notes and have tracked in going ahead and including that third item about the above tank storage. So can we go ahead and move to approve this and then we can get it off to council?
I'm going to look to
Is that how we proceed?
Lisa and Becky to let us know if we can have that sort of approval for a non-final version of the document here. Is that permissible? Is that not?
I think if you are agreed in what the content is going to be, I mean, ideally it would be final. But I think if it's close enough that you can all agree that the content is what it will be in the final form, then that would be fine to approve.
I can also really quick share this with Lisa if she wants to throw it up on the board, this document.
Oh, Lisa's probably not available. She's about to board a flight. Oh,
Oh,
hello.
Yes, I would say if you all are okay with it, make a motion to approve pending the changes discussed.
Great.
And then we will work to get something on a council agenda and work with you all to have somebody present for that. But as Becky mentioned, I'm going to jump off here and hand it to her to close us out with a few things. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lisa. Is there any other, Ralph, I see your hands raised.
Yes, I was going to basically do something very similar to what was, I would like to make a motion, Robert, if it's okay, that based on our discussions and comments, that we give Daniel the authority to do a final draft to be submitted to the council. And then that way we approve it and he'll be the one going to jail if it doesn't work.
You can fire me.
So can I make that if I'm making that motion, if that's okay?
So let me restate that. A motion to complete the document with the edits that we've discussed in the moment.
I would like to make a motion that Daniel take the discussion and comments that we made and prepare a final draft to be submitted to the city council.
Okay. Do we have a second for that motion?
I want to second it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, great. Okay. Is there any further deliberation? I realize we jumped into motion. Not sure if we were done talking. Any other comments on this? Okay. Well, let's take a vote. All those in favor of that?
Right.
All those opposed? All those abstaining? Okay. Ethan, that was abstention. Is that right? Okay. Well, that passes. Daniel, thank you for the hard work putting that together, the hard work
Thank
making
you
the
for
edits.
writing that.
And thank you for everybody. I've done a lot of joint editing of a document on a call like this before, and this is one of the most smooth times I've experienced. So it's very challenging to do that. So thank you, everybody. Okay. Next item up on the agenda was items from staff. Lisa was going to talk about summer event volunteers. Becky, are you able
I'll
to
jump
put on your
in.
Lisa
Yeah,
hat?
so I'll channel Lisa. So hopefully you all received an email from Zach Lance, our residential sustainability coordinator, kind of talking about the need for volunteers this summer. Which we still need volunteers this summer, particularly for the summer concert series and for the Unity in the Community event that the chamber puts on in August. So if you want to check your calendars and just get back to Zach via his email, that would be great. And then we will follow up via email about getting shirts for those who are going to be out volunteering at those events.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Up next is items from the board. I know Ralph, you'd mentioned before that you wanted to talk about who would follow up with you, follow you as liaison to the Front Range Sustainability Council. I do think we discussed this at the last meeting and selected Daniel to be the lucky heir to that throne. But I wasn't sure if there was more that you wanted to discuss on that topic.
No, just to give a quick update, the steering committee of the Front Range Sustainability Council did meet. We're planning on having a committee-wide meeting in September. There will be some updates through the summer that we'll be preparing to keep people engaged. We pretty much decided with people's vacations and travels and summer camps not to try to push that. But part of the goal will be to have the first actual community-wide business meeting in September and start to put some structure and some, plans to start to see some activities that result in change along the Front Range. And Daniel, I just will ask you, are you on the mailing list? Do you get things now?
I don't think so. I haven't received anything in quite a while.
Okay, there may not have been anything to go out, but if you would just forward through Heather or Lisa or somebody your email address and give me permission to give that to Maria Rotunda, who coordinates that, then you'll be involved and I'll let them know that you'll be taking that over. They've asked me to stay on the steering committee, even though I'm no longer on our board. So I'll probably continue to do that for some period of time, but I won't be able to be reporting to the board on activities. So I'll leave that to you. That's
Any
all.
other items from the board? The only other thing I had is, today is the last meeting for Mary, Michelle, and Ralph. So I know our board will look a lot different when we meet in July. And I just want to say thanks for your service to the community and to this group. You've had a lot of engaging thoughts and ideas to help the city move forward. So thank you.
It's been a great pleasure. We've really enjoyed this and leave it in your able hands to keep things moving along. Thanks to everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's so great to all the craziness of the current world. It's been really nice to be on this board and see local action and people passionate about making Longmont a better place. So it's been really nice to be on here. I'm gonna miss it.
Well, you're always welcome. The public is invited.
I'll just be watching.
All right. Well, next up on the agenda is items from council. Councilmember Popkin, did you have anything?
Do I have anything? I have quite a few things, actually.
Oh boy.
First of all, I'll pick up right where we left off on the board composition. Council did vote last night, probably around 11:45 p.m. Last night on the board new board members for the next round. I believe that council accepted SAB's recommendation in terms of the ultimate three that were recommended to advance. Though we did review all of the interviews for SAB. We thank you for the time on that. I shared the time in case you're interested in watching the vote, though it is really just a vote that gets tallied. There was not discussion in that moment. We did have, obviously, we did interview the candidates as well separately. So thank you for those of you who were part of the interview process. I appreciate it. Somewhat related to the interview process, I just want to make a couple notes. Obviously, I wasn't in the room for that, and I just have heard some concerns about the process that went forward there. So I just want to offer a couple comments on that. One, the advisory boards are given some latitude as to how to operate generally and to what degree, the chair and overall the board wants to follow Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure. It's generally technically kind of the process that you should follow, but we do recognize that there's kind of more relaxed versions of that are applied. I will say council doesn't have a particular preference as to exactly how you follow that. What I will say is that I think the main preference would be consistency. And so that, and this is not making a judgment of the process that was followed, just in general, a comment here. And so maybe, Chair Davidson, maybe you and I can chat, in the next month, just about the new group as you onboard 3 new members to SAB, thinking about kind of what type of, process you want to try to uphold going forward in this next term, given that you've now had a few months to get your feet wet as chair. So we can talk about that more specifically. There's real value in consistency for rules and procedures. There's also, I know people appreciate flexibility too, especially if they're not used to operating Robert's Rules of Order and Parliamentary Procedure. But the real value is that if you follow whatever rules you do choose to follow, there's consistency and expectation from all board members on what the process is, so that there's less confusion over how that goes. So I just wanted to stress that that's important as we go forward. And we'll ultimately defer to the chair here, unless there's a grotesque violation that I think would be worth raising. So I hope that is taken in the spirits intended. I also don't know exactly what comments were made during the interview process, but I do want to just reinforce for all board members here that the advisory board, as is city council, is a nonpartisan board. And so any comments on political affiliations of any applicant is not really appropriate at all. So I just want to encourage people to keep that out of it. We are looking for qualifications that are relevant to the board, just as, frankly, city council members are serve a nonpartisan role, and there are nonpartisan campaigns for that. Let's see, new board members. Great. Following up on the discussion today, I think I also had quite a few questions in my own head, though I was letting for PRPA, though I have other opportunities to ask those. If other board members did have questions that they either weren't able to ask, given the density of the presentations and the depth of the presentations, my suggestion here would be that the advisory board compile those questions kind of as a group, kind of perhaps to discuss in the next meeting. And I might also encourage staff to think about how, going forward for these types of denser presentations that hopefully are prepared in advance, perhaps sharing some of those in advance to the extent possible, so that folks can digest that and we can actually save more time for questions. Consider that as a general suggestion here. But I would suggest that I would strongly encourage the board, if you do have more questions, to kind of centralize that, to think about, hey, can we consolidate that questions list across board members to then send forward to staff and to PRPA. Let's see. There was a question that from SAB last time on the interview questions, and whether you guys can update those. I promised I would report back. The short answer is yes, it is okay to update to best suit the board's needs. And just on a sense of timeline, the next board member application process, to the extent that there are openings for this board, would be, I think it would launch in late September or early October. And then the review process would happen probably November, early December. So just a sense of timing, if you did want to update the interview questions in advance and not be like rushed into the process, just putting that on your radar. Yeah. Chair Davidson.
Do we have any vacancies? I thought we were all at like a July cycle in this board only. Like a July start cycle.
Yeah, you might not. I don't know.
If we have more time, I don't want to
terms.
like rush it into the agenda if we don't have to. But
Yeah, you may not have any vacancies. If someone were to, for instance, step down in the next few months, then you would have one. So that would be a situation that you could, address if it came to that.
Good point.
I think those are all of the points that I wanted to make. Is there anything from council meetings recently? Nope. I think those were all the updates I wanted to share. So feel free to update the interview questions as you all see fit. Thank you for all of you for reviewing the applications and those who participated in the interview process. And Chair Davidson, again, just maybe we can chat offline about kind of how you want to set up the next term.
Thank you. Sounds good.
Great.
Okay. Well, there were some informational items in the board packet, so make sure you got a chance to read those. And with that, that takes us to the end of our agenda. Our next meeting will be July 16th in person. So look forward to seeing those of you who are continuing on there then. Is there a motion to adjourn? Or Ralph, did you have something else?
I apologize. One question for staff, and that is, we have badges. And I wondered if we need to return these or destroy them, or what we should do with these. Those of us who are no longer on the board.
That is such a good question, Ralph, that I'm sure Heather would know the answer to. So I think maybe I should have you drop them off at the office here, if you don't mind coming to visit us, at a time a couple weeks hence.
But I just ask that Heather just send us a note to those
Yeah.
who are leaving and give us the instruction and the address and what to do, and we'll make sure
Absolutely.
that we get that taken care of. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a
Email would
chance.
be great.
There's a chance there could be a remote deactivation of the certain people. So it's just
That is
get that
highly
to-
possible.
I don't know technology like you do, Becky, though.
Good question, Ralph. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second that.
All right. Well, all those in favor? Okay, that's everybody. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day and week, and we'll see you in July. Thanks again, Ralph and Michelle.
Take care, all.
Thank you
all.
guys.
So much.
Good luck with everything in the future.
Thank you so much.